Hello and welcome to Sonic Lab. I'm Gaz Williams and this is the first episode of our mini-series of in-depth looks at the new music devices from Teenage Engineering, the Pocket Operators. Here they are, there's three of them, the PO12, the PO14 and the PO16, or the Rhythm, Sub and Factory. And essentially what these are music devices. Are they synthesizers, drum machines? Yeah, I guess you could call them that. But essentially they're sort of standalone devices that are that have built-in sequencers, and a cool thing is that you can link them all up as well and sort of make a little music production platform with them. So these are made by Teenage Engineering. Teenage Engineering is the Swedish company who you may know have brought out the widely acclaimed OP1. Now this is an interesting synthesizer drum machine that's been criticised by some people for being rather expensive. Well, maybe as a way to kind of combat that, Teenage Engineering have released these devices at the rather cheap price of €69 per unit, which seems pretty good to me considering they are pretty functional units. There will be silicon cases that will be made available for these soon. We haven't got them for review yet, but they're going to be €39 each and they'll look something like this. Why would you need a case? Well, they look a little on the flimsy side of things, but actually they are a lot more robust than they appear. The board is very stiff and the buttons are attached pretty kind of well on these. They do feel like they're not going to break in a hurry. And there's a glass over the LCD display there. If I flip it over, we can see that there's two AAA batteries that it runs on. There's no other powering option, so you have to run them on batteries. And there's a little stand built in. Then we've got an audio in and an audio out. Audio in, what's that about? Well, that allows you to chain them, so it passes the audio through them all, so you only need to actually use one input, so that's quite cool if you want to connect them to a little battery speaker. You don't need multiple inputs. And also, it allows the sync pulse to be transmitted down there. We'll look at that in depth in another episode, but for now, this is just an overview. Again, in the other episodes, we're going to look at each one and explore the sounds of each one in further detail too. So if we look at them from the top now, we can see that there's two encoders per unit and this LCD display with kind of funky graphics. And I think this is in part because these are a collaboration of Teenage Engineering and the fashion brand Cheap Monday. Now these graphics are quite a controversial element in a way, because there is some important information to do with the operation, but there is also a little bit of silliness that as you operate things, there's like little animations that go on that don't really have a lot to do with the music making process. But also there is a clock built into them, believe it or not, which is definitely a nod to their kind of obvious influence from the old Nintendo Game & Watches from the early 80s. And there is an alarm function built into these. So what's quite funny about that is that you can use any of your patterns as an alarm. Now, I don't know how many people are going to do that, but maybe, maybe that's what you'll use it as your little clock alarm by your bedside. And each one has actually got a built-in speaker, albeit very quiet, but maybe just enough to wake you up. So if we look at the layout then, so there's a little grid of 16 buttons here surrounded by some function buttons, and we can input notes either in real time or in step time. Without it in play mode then, I can play the notes, and when it's not in play mode as well, I can adjust the various parameters. One thing that's quite fun is that each of the sounds, the parameters that you adjust are different on each sound. So it means that these are things that you do have to really investigate to learn to find out what each one does. Okay, so if we wanted to put things in step time, I would just put it in write mode, which is this bottom corner button here, and then the 16 buttons here which are numbered, I would enter in by just simply tapping them in. And you can see very small LED lights which show where our pattern is. So if we push play now, and we can hear on this tuned one that it's all playing the same note. If I wanted to change what the pitch is, I press and hold on a step, and then the button, change the encoder here, and it tells me in the top right-hand corner what the note is. And controversially, it doesn't let us get any sharps or flats. So these are in C major, or A minor, or D Dorian, however you want to approach the modes. The other encoder is the note length. So if I say, for instance, hold the first note down now and add, I can make that like a long note. So very simple. But if it's in play, I take it out of record enable. If I press and hold record enable, I can put in notes in real time. It's a fixed quantize, and it's also a fixed 16 grid. We can't make shorter step lengths. So these are essentially locked in bars of 4 and locked in the key of C major. So those things may be a restriction to some people, but in a way, part of the reason for that is so that they all play very well together should you want to be linked up with them. So the 3 units share quite a few similarities, but there are specific details that we will look at in the different episodes now. But the things that they do share is that they all have this thing that's called punch-in effects. And basically what punch-in effects are is there are 16 kind of preset effects, meaning that you can't change the parameters of those effects. But when you hold down the effect button and push a button, it will apply that effect. So for instance, and what you notice is, as soon as you've applied them, it instantly writes them into that pattern. And then if you want to get rid of them, you just hold the effect button down and it wipes them. What you'll find is that the effects are more or less the same on each one, and that you'll find, for instance, that there's a low pass filter here on button 5, a sweeping low pass filter on button 6, and sensibly you'll find those in the same place on each one. But there are a few subtle differences, and one of which being that on the pitch devices we can actually use the effect to transpose notes up by a semitone. So you can find those out of scale notes, but it will use up your effect. So the value of that is a little bit limited. The other thing is that the 2 tuned units, the 14 and the 16, also have this thing called key 00. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but what that does is that's kind of like note effects rather than audio effects, and those have the effect of kind of applying arpeggios, little note sort of clusters, and on the synth one you can apply some chords as well. So those things are kind of specific, and we will look at those in more depth in the specific episodes. And the other thing that the devices all share is the same approach to pattern chaining. Now, there are 16 possible patterns that you can program into this, but also you can chain those patterns, and you can chain those patterns in a really swift and easy way. And basically what you do there is when you've got your pattern playing, you hold down pattern button and you go, I want pattern 1 to play, followed by pattern 2, followed by pattern 3. Then I maybe want pattern 1 again to play, and then pattern 4. And then you notice that the sound changes. So the sound that you pick, you kind of store in the pattern. And you don't need to write, you don't need to save things. Everything is always automatically updating and saving as you do it. So that makes for a very swift and fun way of programming. You can make songs up very quickly on these devices. So that's it now for this first episode, this introduction to the Pocket Operators. The next episode, we're going to look in depth at the PO12, the rhythm. I'm Gaz Williams. Bye for now.